Hello and welcome to the Content Advantage, a show for talking, where we're going to talk a little bit about content for content professionals. I'm Scott Abel, and today with me is my co-host, Megan Gilhooly. Megan, hello.
Hey, Scott. How are you doing? Good to see you.
I'm great, thanks.
I want to also introduce our special guest, the founder of Content Rules, the amazing Val Swisher. Thanks so much for joining us, Val.
Hey guys, good to see you. Hi there.
Where are you coming to us from?
I am in gorgeous wine country, California. It's absolutely beautiful.
Wonderful. Do you have your wine with you?
No, I have tea.
Oh, okay. That's probably better for this time in the morning. Very good.
Before we jump into the interview with Val, let's tell the audience a few things if you're new to the platform. First, today's show is being recorded, which means that this URL that you're using to watch the live show right now can be used about 30 minutes after the end of the show today to access the recording of the show. You can share that URL with others in case you'd like to share the show. We hope that you do. Also, we cannot see or hear you, so you don't have to worry about your camera or your microphone. It's not that kind of technology. You can ask a question at any time by using the Ask a Questions feature located in your webinar viewing panel. It allows you to text us a question. We can't text any answers back to you, but we'll know that you asked it, and if we can slip it into the conversation, we'll try to do so. You can also access additional content, and we've got some great stuff in there this time. In fact, if you peek in the attachments and links section of your webinar viewing panel, you can access some great content provided by our guest today that helps explain the theme of today's show, the Personalization Paradox. There's an infographic and some additional content from her company, and you'll definitely want to check that out. There's also some great information in there provided by our sponsors, Zoomin Software. There's one more thing hidden in there, and that's the special discount from our partners at XML Press. They're giving 50% off all their books for information developers this month through the end of August, I believe, 2020. There's instructions for how to claim that 50% off discount on all their ebooks, and we hope you'll take advantage of that. Today's show is brought to you by Zoomin Software. We're thankful for them and their support. Okay, Megan, let's do this.
Great. Let's start off with Val, just a quick sort of introduction. Tell us how you are connected to information development.
Gosh, I feel like I've been here forever. My goodness. I started my career in information development 30 years ago or so, and I started Content Rules 26 years ago. So I've been a writer, I've been a trainer, a course developer, a manager of course developers, and in 1994 started Content Rules, and I'm still here.
Awesome.
Excellent. And of course, we together have been trying to work to create conferences and other events to attract all kinds of people that we think are information developers to work together and to come across from across different disciplines to do that. So that's why part of the reason that we believe in this kind of show and sharing and learning. So let's learn a little bit. We promised our audience something, Megan. We promised that we talk about one thing today, and that's the personalization, I can barely get that out, paradox. So it has a special emphasis on content personalization. So let's dive right in. Val, what is the personalization paradox?
Good question. First of all, it's hard to say, but the personalization paradox is that in order to deliver personalized experiences at scale, you actually have to standardize everything about your content. And that's counterintuitive, right? We're trying to deliver the right content to the right person at the right time on the right device in the language of their choice, totally personalized. But the only way to do this at scale is to standardize everything about your content.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. So the paradox is basically that in order to make things unique and personal for each individual, we have to make things on the back end very much the same and predictable. Is that right?
Exactly right. You need to make the back end completely standard and then personalize it at the point of delivery.
Okay.
Thank you for making that clear, because that seems to me to be a secret that we've been hiding, maybe inadvertently, through the complicated way that we try to explain things in the past. I think to me that makes perfect sense, and it's something that would communicate well to others that don't understand why we want to standardize all the things that we do. We're not trying to take creativity. We're actually trying to provide a more creative solution at the end user's experience point where they interact with our content.
Right. So, and from a high level, what does this mean for how we develop our content versus how we deliver our content?
Yeah, good question. So from a high level, it means that we need to develop our content in very, very small chunks that are standard in every way. And we need to tag them with enough metadata so we can find them, or the systems can find them. And then at that point of delivery, we can combine them in whatever way we need to so that that person asking for the content gets exactly what they need, nothing more and nothing less.
My brain just gets super excited when I hear you say that. Those words. I can barely contain myself because I'm like another human being that totally understands why we need to do it. Exactly. But what you're talking about is a kind of a transformation, right? We've talked about it as a change for a long time and like, tried to make it like sound like it's not something that's revolutionary. It's just a useful thing to do, but it's actually transformational. If we can actually get this right, we can standardize and deliver personalized solutions at scale. That's the big thing, I think, Val, right?
Yeah.
That we do it in a big way. It just won't be for 3 people. It could be for all of the people who want to interact with your brand.
That's right. That's right. Because companies have tried. They've been trying for a couple of years, and most have failed. And, there are different ways to do it. I mean, you can try to create an entire, what we would call an information product, whether it's an ebook or a web page or whatever,
experience
for each and every individual, but it can't possibly scale. I use the analogy of home building, right? If every single person wanted a custom house, they'd each get what they want, right? What faucet, what layout, whatever you want your kitchen over here, whatever you want. But you have to build them one at a time. It takes a long time,
right,
and very expensive.
And you're still using modular pieces, whether they were created in advance and then repurposed,
Right,
fit your purpose, or whether somebody handcrafted them for you. But again, this is about scale, right? This is about leveling the playing field and giving everyone the same and equal experience, access to the same great direct approach, for example, at delivering information, which this seems like a great time to talk just briefly about our sponsor, Megan. Can you tell our audience a little bit about Zoomin software and how the platform is used to personalize technical documentation experiences and kind of personalize them in the way that we just talked about?
Yes, absolutely. So this is actually a topic near and dear to my heart, this personalization paradox, because Zoomin is a delivery tool, and we take content from multiple sources and enable an enterprise to deliver that content in a unified and personalized manner across various touch points. So we help hopefully solve some of the personalization paradox here.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think this is one of the important things that Val's topic brings up, is that this is an area of study that if you actually take some time to look at it and you break it into little pieces, you can see why Val's argument for standardizing things and then being able to repurpose them on demand the way that you need to create a custom experience for somebody, an individual experience for a person, could benefit companies of all kinds. I think this is super exciting. So anyway, thanks for telling us a little bit about Zoomin. And for those of you who have just joined the show, you can learn a little bit more about Zoomin software by visiting the attachments section of your webinar viewing panel. You can also point your web browser to zoominsoftware.com. Okay, Val, without further ado, what do you need to do to your content to transform it in order to provide it in that personalized way? What exactly are some of the steps that could help our audience understand what they have to do?
Okay. So it's a lot of what we've been talking about for a long time. You just need to put it all together. So I like to think of it as a set of nested dolls, the Russian Matryoshka dolls, right? I had a set when I was little, and I loved to play. So think of it as a piece within a piece within a piece within a piece within a piece. If we go from the tiniest doll, right? I think it was about this big. Think of that as your words, your terms. In order for your content to hold together, you need to use the same words, right? And I always use the example of a dog, a canine, a puppy, a hound, a pooch. If we were all collaborating and each writing a small piece of some document or website about how to take care of Fido, we all need to decide, what are we going to call Fido? Is Fido a canine, or is Fido a dog? Or is Fido a hound? It really, I don't actually care what you call it. Just all call it the same thing, because the content that we deal with on a daily basis is a lot more complicated than feeding Fido, right? So we always,
right? It's like it's not intentionally this way, but it ends up being this way. It ends up being not able to be joined together easily, right? Disjointed. So it makes it difficult to streamline and give us a custom experience that everybody would appreciate, that's personalized for them, because it's so disjointed to begin with that it's broken.
yes,
arguing?
Yeah. Absolutely. So just remember, we're taking little pieces of content, and at that point of delivery, we're assembling them. We don't know what's going to be assembled. It's whatever the person is needing on the other end. It's personalized. So we must start by standardizing our terminology and our words.
So you're basically saying that we standardize the words on the authoring side so that on the other side, if you need to use a different term, you can easily map, because you know what word's coming in. You know that dog is coming in. And if you need to standardize by translating to a different language or saying puppy instead of dog, you can do that because you know that the word coming in is dog, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. It has
2 for 2.
Effects on the cost and efficiency and quality of translation. We all know that. Saying the same thing the same way every time you say it. Which leads me to my next nested doll, slightly bigger, which are your sentences. So it's not that we all want to standardize on the same sentence, but we need to have a style guide of some sort that's going to give us the rules of how we combine these words into sentences that make sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There are lots of style guides out there. Pick one. It could be Chicago Manual, AP Style Guide, Microsoft Manual. It doesn't matter. Everyone needs to pick a style guide, because let's keep in mind, it may not, when you're writing, it may not make a difference to you as you're writing, whether you write in the present tense, the future tense, and the past tense. But when you combine all of these things in an order that you don't know, if one person's writing in the future tense and the other person's writing in the past tense, you try to combine those things.
Yeah.
Who's going to understand what you're saying?
It's just
right.
Be crazy that writing professionals, that we don't gravitate immediately to solving this problem, because it seems like it would help us and by leaps and bounds to be more productive, and it would make the experience better, because we've been taught to be creative. So we try to construct sentences in whatever way our brain conjures up as valuable, right? And so each person doubles down on what it is that they do. They don't have to tell other people or evangelize for it. They just do it. They write that way. And so this writing inconsistency makes it sound like one person didn't write it because one person did not write it. And so if we want that experience to sound consistent, I mean, think about it. If you ask your talking devices a question, you get used to the way it answers, then all of a sudden it gave you some totally off the wall, different, the same information, but in a different way. Your brain would be like, that's not what they usually say.
Right.
That's not how I expect the information to come to me. And I think it's about that expectation. We want to set an expectation with the delivery of our content, that it's going to be so good and consistent that you can bank on it. You can rely on it. It's trustworthy, and you can follow it easily. It won't create friction in your life. Right? So Val, the second thing about sentences and their consistency, I think is super bang on. So that's 2 out of 5. Don't let me delay you. I know you've got 3 more that you want to talk about.
So third are paragraphs. Now, when you think about standardizing your paragraphs, again, this is not about we all have to put the same sentences in the same paragraph. When you think about paragraphs, you're really talking about tone of voice and brand. That's really where we see, do we have very complicated paragraphs? Are they simple paragraphs? So we really make sure that we're retaining that tone of voice. Now, of course, the way you structure your sentences and the way you pick your terms also is all about tone of voice and brand and other things. But remember, these are dolls that are nesting within each other. So you have to care about your words, you have to care about your sentences, and you have to care about your brand and your tone of voice. That's the third bubble, if you will.
It seems like, Val, that even paragraphs, when you're at that the third thing that you need to do, which is determine the voice of the brand and the brand, it also has a new thing, not just voice and tone, but cadence, right? Because now we have devices that are trying to replicate the human voice and read back our words, and we have to control the cadence with which those words are delivered, or the cadence changes the meaning of the word, which we don't have to worry about when we're writing.
It's absolutely correct. In fact, the voice interfaces are becoming more and more and more standard at companies creating content. And we really need to be careful that I don't write something that has extremely long sentences that are very complicated and put them together in a paragraph, where Megan writes simple, short sentences and maybe separates a lot of things out, because the voice interfaces are looking at punctuation.
Right.
They are. They're looking for that full stop at the end. Do not forget a period or a question mark, because they don't know where the end of the sentence is. Natural language processing needs that.
You can't make the sentence too long just because it's grammatically correct and it reads well to you, because when it's read out by the device, it's going to be a lot for the person consuming the content. So that's super great advice. That's 3 out of 5. Let's do number 4, Val.
Number 4 are components. So a component is the smallest piece of content that's going to stand on its own. Right? So X number of paragraphs go into making a component. Now, we normally standardize our components in the TechCom world by type, right? So in the DITA world, we would have a task, or we would have a reference, or we would have a concept, and this works whether you're using DITA, whether you're using structured authoring, whether you're using technical content, it works. If you're going to have, for example, let's take a marketing example. Let's say I'm going to create some type of data sheet, whether I print it or it's on the web. The components that I'm putting in need to be standard. So if I have a product description component, then all of my product descriptions need to have some type of standardization. The same with maybe benefits or features or technical specifications. I need to make sure that the way I lay out, not lay out in terms of the way it looks, but the sequence,
the order,
the tech specs and my technical specs. If I'm doing, height by length by width, I am making this up. I can't in a different component say width by length by height and expect people to actually understand anything about my company. And just the confusion.
Or to expect technology to be able to then regurgitate that size when we're changing the order. I'm curious if you can give our audience an idea of how do they standardize this across teams? Meaning it's easy for me to sit down and standardize my own product description across the ones I work on. But how do I work with my teammates to make sure there's a standard, and then work with another team to make sure they're doing it the same?
Yeah, therein lies the real challenge. The challenge is not understanding what to do. The challenge is actually doing it at scale with everybody. So the first thing we need to do is focus on one team at a time. And I hate to say silos, but if you don't have your own silo in order, it's never going to make it to any other silos. So you can use technology to help you do this. There's plenty of technology out there. You can do this with meetings, understanding conversation, making sure everyone can find the style guide, making sure everybody knows the terminology, everybody knows which words we're using. It's, to me, there's a change management component that the content creators need to buy into. Because what they're going to say is, you're taking away my ability to be creative and write, and
blah blah blah. Right? I know we have to get past this. It's like the one stepping stone. If we could just hurdle over this problem, which seems to be all people based, we could probably get to the point where tools could actually help us be the creative people that we believe that we are and should be, and we could use it as an assistive device, right? Val, there are all kinds of assistive devices in use today that are considered useful. And I think it's just another one. Can we, I want to make sure we be respectful of your time. You were going to talk about 5 things, and for those keeping track at home, and I know a few of you are, here's what they were. Number 1 was words and terminology, the small container in the Russian nesting doll example. Number 2 was sentences. Number 3 was paragraphs. Number 4 were components and value. We're just about ready to tell us about the 5th component or type of thing that you need to do in order to understand the Russian nesting dolls metaphor you were using.
Yes. So the biggest piece is the output type itself. Because let's go back to data sheets. If we're creating data sheets, we need to have a model for a data sheet so that we know in a data sheet, these things go together in these ways. So I have the product description at the top and the specifications at the bottom and features on the left, or whatever it's going to be. Right now, given the technology we have today, and I'm going to come back to that, we need to define an output type. Okay, and we need to standardize on it. This is an installation guide, and an installation guide is always going to start with upfront material that's going to be standard boilerplate, and then it's always going to have these things in it, right?
Yeah, now, just like the house metaphor that you used.
Yeah, absolutely, just like the house metaphor. It's not a house if it doesn't have a kitchen.
Right. Yeah, and you have to have necessity things, right? Plumbing and et cetera, and that's all very standardized. In order to make those systems work, you can't have one company decide we're not going to use pipes that size because, well, Bob doesn't like pipes that are that size, so we decided to use totally different pipes. It doesn't happen, right? Because of standardization.
That's right. You would never be able to buy a faucet. There are 20,000 faucets out there that you can buy for your kitchen or your bathroom. The only reason that we can intermix all these different faucet types, whether it's, I got a Moen here or a Kohler there or whatever, is because the plumbing itself, we like to talk about, the plumbing and content. The plumbing, the literal plumbing, uses the same size pipes.
Val, that's a brilliant example. I think everyone can understand.
It is.
That's a personal decision too. People say, oh no, you're not selecting my kitchen faucet. I know people who value the experience of the kitchen and they want to control that. And you're saying they can do that. They can personalize their kitchen experience or water experience, whatever it is, because of standardization.
Exactly. If we didn't have standards, then we wouldn't have all these different feature-filled things. The features can be different because on the back end, the standards are the same.
So when we talked before the show, sorry, Megan, let me just, one thing I asked Val about earlier, before we have these shows with our guests, we sometimes have a coaching call to kind of each learn about each other and kind of decide how we're going to talk about the issue. And we talked about the fact that many people don't understand this as information developers because they haven't worked on projects where they've had to componentize and modularize all their content, and that this becomes a challenge for people to understand outside of organizations that have already done that. So picture on the web, you want to go on a vacation somewhere and you want to share some information with a friend about staying in some special places that you might stay. And maybe you use a site like Airbnb and you can go in and you can like all the houses that you might stay at with your friend. And then you can share that collection of houses that you've liked with somebody else, reusing the same words, sentences, and pictures that were in the Airbnb listing, which was the information output type that Val was talking about. But now I'm a user of that information type, and I'm creating a new information type called the collection I want to send to my friend. And I'm able to do it because up front, those information developers standardize the information in a way that I could recombine it and make my own product, my own personal thing that I give to somebody else. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And with Airbnb, I have an Airbnb, so I know what it's like to make a listing. It's very specific. You have to put exactly the information they want in exactly the fields they want it. Otherwise, it's not going to play nicely with all the other listings.
And validate, right? We talk about that in the past. And validated, they make sure that that's the kind of quality information that's in the container matches the standard, at least enough to that machines could know, and in order to process the best consistent content through that channel.
So I have a question that I think some of the writers and especially marketers are going to be thinking right now, and that is, if we're standardizing the writing, when I think about how we do this today, a lot of people talk about the idea of personas and writing to a specific persona so that we are hitting the right target. And what you're saying sort of flies in the face of that. You're basically saying, let's break it down to the bare minimum, and then the personas should be used, I assume, on delivery. But how do you think through the idea of creating content specific to a person versus creating boring, dry content that the delivery tool will then output?
Okay. Well, first of all, none of the content you create has to be boring or dry. It has to be standard and componentized and use the right words, but it can be as enjoyable as your brand and your tone say. So I want to make sure that people know I am not advocating that we take out personality from our content. I'm advocating that we all use the brand voice the same way. To that point, though, I have never been a fan of personas, ever. To me, I was talking to someone, it might have, I'm trying to think of who it was. It might have been Rob Rose. I don't remember exactly who it was.
I think I remember this.
Yeah, who said, oh, we've been doing personalization, not personalization. And personas are nothing more than stereotypes. They're stereotypes that we create, and then we write to thinking that we actually know Joe, and he's 37 and he's married and whatever, and we somehow know what Joe wants. And then we have to write for Sally, and Sally is whoever Sally is. And this gives me a visceral problem, because I have a problem with stereotypes. But first of all, we cannot write for every single stereotype. We can't even think about them. Second, people are not stereotypes. People are individuals who need personalized content that's individual to them, regardless of what you think they need. Third, stereotypes do not ever translate, ever. You cannot take a US stereotype and think that in France or in Japan or in China or Brazil, your Joe and your Sally are going to in any way transfer.
Right.
I get the sense that this is one of those things that has really evolved over time, because when personas came out, they probably were good enough. Today, I would suggest they're good but not sufficient, because we know so much more from a technical level about the people reading our content. So I think maybe 20 years ago, personas were a great thing because it's what we had access to. It was our way of saying, here's how we personalize. But today, you're right. I think it probably is not enough. It's not sufficient.
Step it up a notch. There's so much competition. There's so many other people that figured this out, by the way. They didn't figure it out from a publishing perspective. They figured it out from an e-commerce perspective or a gambling perspective or a gaming perspective. But they figured it out. The secret is out. And now we all have to do better. And in order to do better, you have to listen to your audience. And I can see all of us nodding. So we're going to nod. And I'm going to say, because we have some questions from the audience for Val. So Megan and I will ask a few of them. The first one I'll tackle, and then I'll give Megan a couple that she can ask you, Val. First, could you please repeat the definition of the personalization paradox? Scott said it correctly this time. The personalization paradox. Pop those P's. Can you do a definition for us?
Sure. The personalization paradox is that in order to create personalized experiences at scale, you must standardize absolutely everything about your content.
Perfect, succinct,
Nice.
and that's the trick. I think that's a tweetable moment if ever. Megan, could you tackle a question for Val?
Yeah, so a question about marketing folks. So someone says, I frequently see that marketing people insist on using synonyms and vivid language to get and maintain good search engine ranking, which, we know that this is true. So Val, do you have any advice for selling standardization to them, meaning the marketing team, so they don't feel like they are downgrading the content?
It's a really great question. And it is an important question, and it's not without controversy. So lately, I have been working with many marketing teams. This is kind of new in the past, I'd say 2 years, that all of a sudden marketing teams are realizing, first of all, their content is out of control. They don't, people are using so many synonyms that nobody knows what they're talking about anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Second, they can't seem to get a good translation at all for anything. The translations are horrific and they're expensive and they take a lot of time. And third, they're not actually promoting their brand using all those synonyms.
Right.
So what I would say is you sit down and you decide what your voice is going to be. Get whatever kind of team you need. Do you want a friendly voice? Do you want a sort of distanced voice, right? And then you decide what words are allowed in that voice. You don't have to pick one word per item. I'm not saying never use a synonym.
Right.
I'm saying use a synonym because you thought it through to begin with.
So Val, making that argument, I think the question is about trying to figure out what's that magic piece of information that I can use to convert somebody. They probably believe, who wrote that question, they probably believe that. I'll give you something. You want marketers to care? Go in and tell them you can deliver the right value proposition to the right prospect to convert them into the right kind of customer, because that's what they are trying to do, and they are failing miserably. They can't aim the message at me. They aim the message at the bucket that I belong in, called the persona. And here's the facts. That if you try to go find scientific evidence that shows that personas do anything, what you can easily find is that there's not any benefit to being in the persona bucket. There's a benefit to making a persona bucket, chalking all those people in there, and then aiming your content at it, because it means you as a writer can say, oh, I don't have to aim at everyone. Just Bob the persona, Barb the persona, and Tony the persona. As long as I do these three things, I'm doing a great job. And that's just not true in today's market. The competitive nature, we have to be able to do that. So value proposition, right? I
think the best way of saying that is ask them to do the research. Have them prove to you that what they're doing today is the right thing. And I'll bring up an example that is not really marketing related, but has a similar tint. In Amazon, we did some research on some of the messages that were going out to customers. So agents were sending messages to customers, and they were gold on the positive response rate that they got back.
Got it.
They were upset because they were getting low positive response rates. And when we dove into it, we realized they were changing the messages. And so in their minds, they were thinking something heartfelt from me is better than a canned response. But the customers were saying, no, I want the right response. Like, I don't care how it sounds. I just want the right response. And so they had to, these support agents had to reassess their assumptions about what was good content for their customers. And I think marketers need to do the same thing.
Science, science, science. All right, one more question for Val. What do you think are the unique challenges around personalization paradox within the digitally delivered healthcare?
Healthcare is a great place for personalization. We've been working with, right now, we have almost exclusively healthcare customers. I think they're the ones spending money. Healthcare, there's nothing more personal than when I have a health issue.
Right.
Nothing personal. So if I go, and Mayo Clinic is really on the forefront of this. They really are. I've spoken to them many times. The stuff that they do, they really are a model.
They listen to us. So they listen to the
Yes.
information science community, and they say, let's test it as you suggest. And then they figure out what works, and that's what they do.
Yep. And they're in the forefront with things like using animation and all sorts of things, right? So it's specifically in healthcare, whether I'm a patient or a provider. I worked with a customer that needed to provide the right information to the physician at the point of care. Yeah. There's no time. There's no time for me to look things up. I need to put in exactly what these symptoms are, and I need to know the 3 possible diagnoses, and I need it now. Don't make me go digging for it in, some reference book. So I think the urgency is really in healthcare. That's the most urgent place. The rest of it is, I'm going to go shopping. That's nice. I mean, it's important. We don't need to shop. I get it. But healthcare is the number one place where we should be focusing all of our attention on providing the right information at the right time to the right person on the right device in the right language.
Excellent.
And if we add to that, I think there's a secondary paradox, which this person might be thinking about, and that is the paradox between personalization and privacy. So how do we make sure that we're personalizing without making them think that we have data about them that we shouldn't have, right? And so I don't know that you have an answer for that in 3 minutes. That would take an entire show. But I think that's one of the considerations. But urgency is also a huge, huge consideration there.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I failed to mention is that I'm writing a book called The Personalization Paradox. And I have the subtitle. We do have a chapter on sort of the creepiness of how much companies know about you. There is a chapter. It's not called creepiness, but there's a section called they see you when you're sleeping, And there are all kinds of regulations, GDPR, there's HIPAA, there's all kinds of regulations. And if you're in a regulated industry, it's key that you follow those regulations. So whether that means a physician is on a private network, getting information about that patient in a private network, or I'm asking in a general way, I'm going into some big knowledge base in a more general way. It's a sticky topic. I don't have an answer. We don't have answers.
But you'll be back on a future show, so we'll bring you back to talk with some healthcare experts, and we'll talk all about that, because as a patient of the healthcare system in the United States of America, I can tell you that standardization would have helped my personal experience in a million ways. So we won't get into that this time around. First, we'd like to thank Val Swisher for joining us. Both Megan and I really appreciate you making time to be on our show today and to sharing what you know with our audience. So thanks for being here.
You're so welcome.
Thanks, Val.
So much fun. I really appreciate being on the show and getting to talk to you guys this morning. Thank you.
Before we go, we want to let you know about a special offer from the folks at XML Press. They've got 50% off all the ebooks in their library. You can check the attachments and links section of your webinar viewing panel to figure out how to claim that offer. There's also the aforementioned handouts made available from our guest presenter, Val Swisher, today to help you better understand the personalization paradox. And there's the information available from Zoomin, our sponsor, Zoomin Software. Check out all those documents and share them with others. Thanks for joining us for our show today. Our next show, you'll get an invitation in your inbox shortly to join us Tuesday, August the 4th, when we talk with Rob Gillespie about the future of technical communication. Until then, be safe, be well, and keep doing good work. Thanks for joining us.
Bye, everyone. Ensure your customers find the answers they need with Zoomin. Bring together product content from all teams and sources to deliver a unified, personalized content experience. Check us out at www.zoominsoftware.com.